The Polo GTI 6R is currently the cheapest modern GTI money can buy. For many, it is going to be their very first GTI, especially young buyers. This car was the very first GTI I owned, and I can say I loved every moment of owning it. Well, that is of course when it wasn't having issues. This car is both amazing yet horrendous for a first-time GTI buyer. For many people, buying a GTI is such a desirable thing, yet with the prices of these cars, it becomes just a dream, especially for young buyers. This often leads to you looking for the cheapest possible GTI, and a lot of buyers end up setting their eye on the Polo GTI 6R, as was the case with myself. A little bit of context: for the longest time I wanted a GTI. Ever since the Mark V Gold GTI was first released, I was in love. Unfortunately, buying a GTI for the average person is no easy task. In 2018, I decided I didn't just want one, I needed one. At the time, the Mark V being quite old, I wanted something more modern. Price-wise, the only option was a Polo GTI. I didn't know much about the car, and frankly, dealers are not always upfront. So, I'm going to educate potential buyers of this car with knowledge I wish I had when I bought this car. I purchased my Polo GTI 6R in December 2018 and traded it for a Polo GTI 2.0 AW in June 2021. I had my car for a good 2.5 years and about 20,000 kilometers. The Polo GTI 6R was produced from 2010 to 2014 before it was replaced by the Polo GTI 6C. The Polo GTI 6R used the EA111, a 1.4-litre twin-charged engine producing 132 kilowatts and 250 Nm of torque, paired to a 7-speed DSG dry-clutch transmission. This car was only available in an automatic. The car is priced between 120,000 Rand to 240,000 Rand. Now this may not sound like much power, but what made this car so unique was the fact that unlike every other GTI, it used both a supercharger and turbocharger. For me personally, this just made the car so thrilling to drive, with the supercharger kicking in immediately the moment you hit the throttle, giving you the satisfying whine before the turbo takes over to give you even more boost. The power was just instant and available at low RPMs. The twin-charge setup, as exciting as it was, also added so much complexity to this engine and proved to also add to the unreliability. This was a lot of power for a tiny 1.4-litre engine, and at times this engine just couldn't cope with all that power. This was the only GTI to ever use this engine, and VW gave up on it immediately after this car went out of production. The complexity and constant failures led to VW focusing on the 2-litre TSI and the EA888 engine instead. Now, when purchasing this car, be sure to test drive the car and to really push it in order to determine if the car has any underlying issues. A few important things to look out for. The power delivery should be very smooth. If there is any stuttering, you could have a misfiring engine, which could be caused by a whole list of issues. From a stop, if you have any hesitation from the car, this car has a bad clutch, which can result in almost a 30,000 Rand clutch replacement bill, which was the case with my car. Listen for any loud rattles, especially on startup or even idle, as this could be a bad timing chain and could result in you needing an engine replacement. Test drive several different cars, don't be shy, you need to get the feel for the car. My advice when buying this car would be to spend time on finding the right car. Do not buy the first car that you test drive. This car is one you need to get the feel for. When it comes to the Polo GTI 6R, not all of them are lemons. There are many that are still going strong even with high mileage. Avoid buying 2010, 2011 and 2012 cars, as these model years were absolutely plagued by issues. The best years to choose from are the 2013 and 2014 cars with the CTH engine. Avoid buying cars with the CAXA or CAVE or CAVD engines, as these were plagued by failures and issues, and these are the lemon engines of the batch. The easiest way to confirm the engine type is by checking the VIN sticker for the engine number. It should start with CTH. Now, fuel-wise, the car was much lighter than I originally expected it to be, especially considering the way that I drive the car. After installing a downpipe especially, that's when the fuel usage became really low. At the time, about 300 Rand of fuel would easily get me 250 kilometers. With the DSG7 proving its worth with better fuel efficiency, that gearbox was a big reason for why this car is significantly more fuel efficient than its counterpart in the Golf GTI. Service and maintenance wise, don't expect it to be exactly cheap. Remember, after all, it is a GTI. It's going to be a little bit pricey. The average service will cost you anywhere between 1,500 and 3,000 Rand at VW, though you can take your car to an independent workshop where you would probably pay a little bit less. While things like tires can set you back roughly about 2,000 Rand per tire. Now I know all the negatives make this car seem like a horrible choice, especially for a first GTI, but it really isn't. In fact, I absolutely loved my car to death, and I would take it any day over the 2-liter TSI. The non-existent lag, the instant power, the feeling of a dry clutch, the weight, the small pocket rocket size, the sound of this car made it so lovable. The biggest piece of advice, not only when it comes to the Polo GTI 6R, but any GTI in fact, I would highly recommend getting an aftermarket warranty at the very least, so that you can at least cover some of the issues when they do arise. Because the one thing about VW is often the prices of maintenance just turn out to be so much more than you honestly expect it to be. And really, you need to make sure that you maintain the car properly. Especially things like the DSG gearbox, it can prove to be a real pocket breaker, especially when it comes to replacement parts. Things like the mechatronics unit, which can go wrong and is quite a well-known issue, especially with the DSG7 in this car. Don't get me wrong, the DSG7, the dry clutch especially, is an absolutely amazing gearbox. I just love the way that car shifts. Nothing compares to that. I'm going to be honest with you about this. Even my current 2-liter turbo, the Polo GTI AW, the shifts are just nothing compared to the Polo GTI 6R. The DSG7 is an amazing gearbox, but it has its issues. Things like mechatronics failures, just gearbox failures in general, they can be quite costly. The average mechatronics unit replacement might set you back about 38,000 Rand. This is obviously at the VW dealer, and one of the biggest issues with GTIs is the fact that you often really need to get your repairs and maintenance done at VW, because really, especially in South Africa, there aren't many specialists when it comes to the DSG gearbox. And some people just don't want to touch DSG gearboxes at all because they fear getting it wrong, or sometimes just not having the expertise to actually service this specific gearbox. When it comes to the Polo GTI 6R, I highly recommend that you have some money saved up for potential failures and potential repairs that you may have to make. It's going to happen. There's just no denying that. Look, after all, the Polo GTI 6R is not a car you can buy brand new, so it's not going to come with a manufacturer warranty. So you need to be prepared for potential maintenance that you may need to do. In conclusion, this car is the perfect first GTI. I just wouldn't recommend keeping it for more than 2 years. At the end of the day, the 2-liter TSI is more refined, more developed as an engine. It is probably a good idea to plan for a trade-in at some point.